back home here and started Harvard the next September. Yeah.
So now you're at Harvard, and
Yeah, I tried out for the freshman fencing team, and the coach Renee said, "Okay, you come down and I'll give you lessons." And it was very different from the kind of lessons that I gave here or that Yarrick gives here now at MIT. In our case, we had to work against the coach, every one of us who was coming out for fencing. And Renee used to take great pleasure in beating us one after the other.
was it more like a bout than
It would be a fencing lesson, and then he would say, "All right, now I want you to use what I've just taught you at the right time when you see me make a mistake." And so we would start bouting, and he wouldn't tell you when he was going to make the mistake, but you were supposed to see it.
Mm.
And then you were supposed to put into action perfectly what he had taught you. So there was the theory of it, and he would slow down so that, and then and then we would hit him, and he would say, "Oh, very good. Now let's see if you can do it quicker."
Right.
If I really mean it. And you wouldn't even see the mistake he made. And you would try and he would dance out of the way, and you'd be stuck out there on the lunge with your foil in empty air, and he wouldn't even look at you. And then he'd simply beat your foil once and nail you with his repost. Well, he was tremendous, but he was pretty good. Yeah, he was a pretty good teacher. But
did the other fencers? So you came in inexperienced. Did
I
other people there
didn't have
any
any experience at all. Several of the other fencers had trained in the secondary schools and the private schools,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was the varsity that, they all knew how to fence.
Oh, so you were sort of pre-varsity at that time? Was it
All
junior varsity?
they just had freshman fencing and then the varsity fencing.
see.
Your first year, you couldn't fence in any of the varsity bouts.
Yeah.
So we were just allowed to fence against prep schools
I see.
and the Yale freshman team, like that.
Now, Renee's lessons, were those sort of standard lessons at the time, do you know, looking back?
Looking
Or
back
was
at
he
them,
particularly
well,
interesting approach, or?
he had an approach that was very classical. You had to work hard, just as any coach demands. And what he used to do was, if you couldn't get the movement correctly, he would say, "Oh, you're moving your feet too much. And so you're not focusing on the right thing. You're not focusing on your handling of your weapon and extending and defending yourself at the right time." And so he would strap down your rear foot. So you couldn't move your feet too much. The only thing you could do was lunge and recover, lunge and recover.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would give you practice in that. When was it time to lunge, and were you doing this in the proper synchronization with the blade going out and then fooling the other person's attempt to parry, or continue with the lunge if the other person panics and simply tries to counterattack. And so we got a lot of practice doing that. And it was very simple, but it was quite effective. You learned to fence with proper style, with proper technique.
So it seems like the handwork had to be very clean.
Your handwork had to be very clean, and there wasn't much footwork at all.
Yeah.
No, not very much at all. Although I remember one guy on the varsity, Fells Carter, was a saber man. Fells Carter, when the other guy would make a flush at him, Fells Carter wouldn't retreat. He would make a backward somersault. And just as he completed the somersault, up he would come charging right back at the other guy, who would stop dead in his tracks. And then Fells would have his choice of where he wanted to hit him as he finished his flesh.
Oh my God.
It was like a circus.
Yeah. Did you do a lot of bouting, or was it mostly lessons with the master, or?
Well, we did an awful lot of bouting also.
Even as a freshman, you were bouting, so you were bouting amongst each other.
Yeah, and then if he saw you were making too many mistakes, he would take you out of the bout, and he would say, "All right, I want you to go and practice against the wall."
Yeah.
And he had these foils that were anchored to the wall and on springs.
Yeah.
And he would make you practice against them
And
for
did you
15 minutes.
do like footwork at all, or other
We did, but
calisthenics
it
exercises?
wasn't the footwork, it was just the standard advances, the balestra, very little on the flesh. That was entirely up to you. He
Yeah.
didn't believe in the flesh himself,
Mhm.
but he knew that the young guys liked to run. And so during our freshman year, we couldn't flesh.
Yeah.
The upperclassmen, they could flesh, you know. And we were taught mainly just the basic parrying moves of 6 and 4, 6 and 4, and then towards the end of the season, counter 4 and counter 6.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And 7, 8, you didn't really go
We
into that
didn't do
much?
7 and 8 until we were sophomores.
Not too much at any one time, huh?
Well, don't forget, we were freshmen, and so
Yeah.
we were only getting little bits of his time.
Right,
Most of his
yeah.
time was going
Of
to the
course.
varsity.
Of course, yeah.
You know, so, the freshman bouts were not protracted at all.
Yeah.
It would be an attack, a parry repost, or attack, then a remise,
Yeah.
and then halt.
Yeah. So after the freshman year, as a sophomore, were you able to get on the varsity team, or you were training with the
Yeah,
varsity?
they elected me captain of the freshman